Daniel had spent the last 3 Christmas Eves in silence. The ranch, once filled with laughter and warm lights, had grown quiet after his wife passed away. He had tried to keep himself busy each year, fixing fences or tending to the animals, but no matter what he did, the emptiness always returned at night. This Christmas Eve was no different. The sky had turned a dull gray early in the morning, and by afternoon, a heavy storm rolled in. Snow came down in thick, swirling waves, covering the land in white. The wind howled around the house, brushing against the windows like long, cold fingers. Daniel moved slowly through his home, lighting a few lamps to brighten the dark rooms. He made a simple dinner for himself, some soup and bread, but even that felt like too much effort for one person. He sat by the kitchen window, listening to the storm outside. Though he tried not to think about it, he remembered how he and his wife used to sit in the same spot, sharing laughter and stories while the snow fell outside. Now there was only silence. He cleaned the dishes, put away the extra wood by the fireplace, and checked the animals one last time. The barn was cold, but the animals were safe, huddled together with extra hay. As he was locking the barn door, the wind pushed against him so hard that he had to lean his weight forward. It was one of those nights where only a very lost or very desperate person would be outside. He walked back toward the house, brushing snow off his shoulders. Just as he reached the steps, he heard something faint. At first he thought it was the wind, but then it came again, a soft, uneven knocking. It sounded like it was coming from the barn. Daniel paused. No one should be out in a storm like this. Maybe a tree branch had fallen and was hitting the wall. Or maybe one of the gates had come loose. The thought made him uneasy. The last thing he needed was broken fencing in the middle of winter. He grabbed his lantern and walked back to the barn. The snow reached up to his boots, and the cold bit at his face. When he reached the barn door, the knocking came again, gentle, shaky, as if someone barely had the strength to do it. Daniel pulled the door open, and for a moment the wind swept so much snow inside that he could see nothing. But then, in the dim light of the lantern, a figure became visible. A young woman, wrapped in a thin jacket, stood shivering at the entrance. Her hair was wet, her shoes were soaked, and her lips trembled from the cold. She looked no older than her early 20s. Her eyes lifted to meet his, frightened yet hopeful. "Sir, please." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "I didn't know where else to go." Daniel blinked in surprise. He had not seen anyone unfamiliar in weeks. The nearest town was several miles away, and the bus route did not come near the ranch. He stepped closer, holding up the lantern so he could see her clearly. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, trying not to sound harsh. "You'll freeze to death in this weather. My bus broke down miles back," she said. "I tried waiting for help, but nobody came. I thought I could walk to town, but I must have gone the wrong way." Her voice cracked. "I've been out in the snow for hours." Daniel felt his heart tighten. She looked exhausted, her cheeks pale from the cold, her clothes damp, her hands shaking. He knew how dangerous the night was. Even strong men avoided being outside in storms like this. She must have been completely worn out to knock on a barn door in the middle of nowhere. "You'd better come in," he said, stepping aside. "You can't stay out here." She hesitated, perhaps unsure if she should trust him. But the cold was too much. She stepped inside the barn, but Daniel motioned toward the house instead. "No, not here," he said. "It's too cold in the barn. Come to the house. There's a fireplace." She nodded. Daniel guided her across the snowy ground, keeping the lantern held high. The wind pushed against them with every step, but she followed him quietly. When they reached the house, he opened the door quickly and let the warm air inside greet them. "Sit here by the fire," Daniel said, placing a chair close to the hearth. "Warm your hands." She sank into the chair gratefully, stretching her fingers toward the flames. Even from a distance, Daniel could see how drained she was. Her clothes were wet, her shoes muddy and icy, and she looked like she had not eaten in a long while. He brought her a blanket and draped it over her shoulders. She held it close, letting out a shaky breath. For a long moment, Neither of them spoke. The crackling of the fire filled the room, spreading a comforting heat. "What's your name?" he finally asked. "Emily," she said softly. "I'm sorry for coming like this. I didn't want to bother anyone." "You're not bothering me," Daniel replied. "You were out in a storm. Anyone would have helped." She gave a small, tired smile, but her eyes dropped to the floor. "Not everyone is kind," she whispered. Daniel didn't press her for details. Something in the way she spoke told him she had been through more than a broken bus ride. He walked to the kitchen, heated up some soup, and placed a warm bowl in front of her. "You must be hungry," he said. "Eat as much as you want." Emily looked at the bowl as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch it. Then, slowly, she took a spoonful. The moment the warm food touched her lips, a faint relief passed over her face. She ate carefully, quietly, as if she was afraid to make a mistake. When she finished most of the bowl, she set the spoon down with trembling fingers. She looked up at Daniel with worried eyes. "Thank you," she said. I really don't have anything to give. I'll do anything for shelter and food. I don't want to be a burden." Daniel felt a slight shock at her words. Not because she was offering anything, but because they revealed just how desperate she must be. No one used such words, unless life had pushed them into a corner. "Emily," he said gently, "you don't owe me anything. You're safe here. That's all that matters." She blinked, surprised. "You're really just helping me? Without wanting anything in return?" "Yes," he said simply. "You're cold, hungry, and alone on Christmas Eve. I wouldn't turn anyone away in that situation." Her eyes filled with emotion, though she tried to hide it. "Most people wouldn't open their door," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone would help." Daniel shook his head. "Then you've been around the wrong people." The fire warmed the room, and slowly Emily's shivering stopped. Daniel placed another log in the fireplace, letting the flames rise. She looked around the house, noticing how quiet it was. "You live alone?" "Yes," he replied. Emily nodded as if she understood without needing an explanation. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, letting the heat soothe her aches. The storm outside still roared, but inside the house, the world felt calmer. She looked at the flickering flames and took a deep breath. "Thank you for letting me in," she said again, her voice steadier. "If you hadn't opened the door, I don't know what would have happened to me." Daniel sat down in the chair across from her. "Well, you're safe now. That's what counts." For the first time that evening, Emily's shoulders relaxed. She leaned back slightly, letting the warmth sink into her tired body. The worry in her eyes softened, replaced by something like relief. The storm outside continued to rage, but for both of them, something had already begun to change. One small knock on a barn door had brought two lonely souls together on a night that was meant for warmth, kindness, and hope. And neither of them knew yet, but this Christmas Eve would become the start of a very unexpected journey, one that would change both their lives in ways they never could have imagined. The storm outside did not slow down through the night. The wind kept pushing against the windows, and the snow piled higher against the walls of the house. Inside, however, the fire kept the living room warm and bright. Emily sat quietly with the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Daniel could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but he also sensed a deep sadness, something she was trying hard to hide. He brought her a cup of warm tea. She accepted it with both hands, letting the heat melt some of the cold that had settled into her skin. "You should rest," Daniel said softly. "You walked far in the storm." Emily shook her head. "If I rest now, I might fall asleep sitting here." Daniel nodded. He remembered how tired he had been after long days working on the ranch. Sometimes his body felt heavy enough to collapse wherever he stood. "You can sleep on the couch if you want," he said gently. "It's comfortable." "I will, after a little while," she replied in a quiet voice. Daniel didn't push her. Instead, he sat nearby in his old chair, the one he had spent too many silent evenings in. For a while they didn't talk. The fire crackled. The wind roared, but inside the home, There was a strange sense of peaceful companionship. After a few minutes, Emily spoke. "You said you live alone. For how long?" Daniel looked into the fire before answering. 3 years, he said. "My wife passed away." Emily's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm sorry." "It's all right," he replied. "Life changes, and we try to move forward. Some days are easier, some aren't." She nodded gently. Her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. "I understand what it feels like to lose something important." Daniel noticed the quiet sadness in her voice but didn't ask any questions. He didn't want to force her to share more than she wanted to. Instead, he said, "Sometimes, telling someone helps." Emily took a slow breath, as if she was gathering courage to speak. "I didn't have a good home life," she finally said. "That's why I left. I thought moving to another city would solve things. But life doesn't fix itself that easily." Daniel listened without interrupting. Emily's voice stayed calm, but he could hear the tiredness underneath. "I tried working in a few places," she continued. "Small jobs here and there. But nothing lasted. And the people around me." She paused, searching for the right words. "Let's just say they didn't care much about someone like me." She looked down at the cup in her hands. "When the bus stopped because of engine trouble, everyone else had someone to call. I didn't. So I waited. And when nothing happened, I tried walking. I thought maybe I'd reach a town before the storm got worse." Daniel felt a quiet ache in his chest. She wasn't just tired from walking. She was tired from life. "You made it here," he said gently. "That's something." She smiled faintly at his attempt to comfort her. "Maybe I was just lucky. Or maybe," Daniel said, "you were strong enough to keep going until you found help." Emily looked at him with surprise, as if no one had said that to her before. "Thank you," she whispered. The fire glowed warmly between them. Outside, the storm continued to shake the windows, but neither of them seemed to notice it as much anymore. After some time, Emily's shoulders relaxed. She finished the tea and set the cup on the table. Daniel stood up slowly. "Let me get you a pillow and another blanket. You should sleep now. The storm isn't stopping anytime soon." Emily nodded. "Thank you for everything. I didn't expect any kindness today." He brought the extra blanket, placed the pillow at one end of the couch, and stepped back. Emily lay down carefully, as if she wasn't used to soft places anymore. Daniel watched her settle in, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Good night, Emily," he said quietly. "Good night," she murmured before her eyes finally closed. Daniel turned off the lights and went to his room. As he lay on his bed, he found himself thinking about her, how young she was. How alone she must have felt walking in the storm. He hoped she would be all right. He hoped she would find her way forward, whatever that meant for her. When morning came, the storm still hadn't stopped. Snow covered everything outside. Daniel put on his boots and coat, checked the animals in the barn, and made sure everything was safe. When he returned to the house, he saw Emily sitting by the fireplace, awake but still wrapped in the blanket. "You're up early," he said. She smiled a little. "I'm used to waking up early. Jobs I had before started very early." Daniel nodded. "I made breakfast. You should eat." She hesitated, then followed him to the kitchen. He served simple scrambled eggs and toast. Emily ate with quiet gratitude, thanking him after every few bites. Daniel found her politeness almost heartbreaking, like she was used to being unwelcome everywhere she went. After breakfast, Daniel looked out the window. The storm was still strong. The roads were buried under snow. "I'm afraid you'll have to stay here until the storm ends," he said. Emily immediately looked worried. "I don't want to be a problem." "You're not," Daniel said firmly. "It's dangerous out there." She nodded but still seemed uneasy, as if she wasn't used to depending on anyone. To make her feel more comfortable, Daniel asked, "Would you like to help me with some small chores around the house?" "Only if you want to." Emily's face changed slightly. For the first time, she looked more relaxed. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I don't like sitting without doing anything." So they spent the morning doing simple tasks, sweeping the floor, trimming loose threads from old blankets, wiping dust from the shelves. Emily worked quietly, but carefully. Daniel could tell she was trying her best, even though he hadn't asked for perfection. When they were done, they sat by the fireplace again. Emily looked around at the ranch house. "It's peaceful here," she said. "It feels safe," Daniel nodded. "It's been quiet for a long time. Too quiet, sometimes." Emily looked at him, understanding in her eyes. "Do you miss your wife a lot?" Daniel took a slow breath. "Every day. She was my partner in everything. The ranch feels empty without her." "I'm sure she was a good person," Emily said gently. "She was," Daniel replied with a small smile. "She had a way of making everything feel warm." Emily went silent for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad you were home last night. I don't know what would have happened to me otherwise." Daniel looked at her with sincere kindness. "I'm glad you knocked. No one deserves to face a storm alone." Emily's eyes softened again. "Thank you." The day passed slowly. They talked about simple things, animals, old stories from the ranch, Emily's memories of school, the places she had traveled after leaving home. She spoke carefully, choosing her words, as if afraid to share too much. But Daniel didn't rush her. He let her speak in her own time. By evening, the storm finally began to weaken. The snow slowed, the wind grew softer, and the sky shifted from dark gray to a pale winter blue. The world outside looked calm again. Emily stood by the window, watching the falling snow. "The storm will end by tomorrow," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes, it looks like it." She looked thoughtful, almost uncertain. "I don't know where I'll go after it ends." Daniel wanted to reassure her, but he didn't want to pressure her. So he simply said, "We'll talk about it when the time comes." Emily nodded slowly. She turned back toward the fire, her expression mixed with relief and worry. As night came again, the ranch felt a little less lonely, a little warmer. Two people who had both carried sadness in their hearts were sharing a space where, even for a moment, they didn't feel alone. It was still Christmas Eve in spirit, even though the hours had passed. And something about that night, something about their unexpected meeting, had opened a small door in both of their lives, a door that neither of them wanted to close. The next morning arrived slowly, as if the world itself was still waking from the long storm. Soft sunlight pushed through the clouds, and the snow on the ranch sparkled like tiny crystals. The storm had left everything covered in white fences, rooftops, trees, and long fields stretching far beyond the house. It looked peaceful, almost magical, the kind of beauty that only comes after a harsh night. Daniel stepped outside to check the ranch. The air was cold but calm. His boots sank deep into the fresh snow as he made his way to the barn. He fed the animals, checked the gates, and made sure nothing had broken during the storm. The silence around him felt different today, not empty, but gentle, as if the world was giving him a quiet moment before the day began. When he returned to the house, he saw Emily already awake. She was standing near the kitchen window, wrapped in the same blanket from the night before. Her hair was a little messy, her face still sleepy, but there was a small hint of peace in her expression. "Good morning," Daniel said. She turned toward him with a soft smile. "Good morning. The snow looks beautiful." "It does," Daniel agreed. "Much calmer than yesterday." Emily nodded. "It feels like a new day." Daniel made breakfast, warm oatmeal with a bit of honey. Emily thanked him again, as she always did. But this time her voice was more relaxed, less unsure. She ate slowly, enjoying the warmth of the food. After breakfast, Daniel rolled up his sleeves. "I have some chores outside, but if you want to stay inside where it's warm, that's fine." Emily shook her head quickly. "I want to help. I don't want to just sit here." He looked at her gently. "Only if you feel strong enough." "I do," she said with quiet confidence. So he found an extra pair of gloves for her and a thick coat that one of his relatives had left during a past visit. It was a little big on her, but it kept her warm. She followed him outside, stepping carefully through the snow. Their first task was clearing a path from the house to the barn. Daniel started shoveling, and Emily helped by pushing snow away with her boots and a smaller shovel he gave her. She worked slowly at first, as if learning how her body moved in the heavy coat and gloves. But soon she found a rhythm. And though her breaths grew heavy from the cold air, she didn't complain. "You don't have to work hard," Daniel reminded her. "I want to," she said simply. "It feels good to do something." They moved from clearing snow to feeding the animals. Emily laughed softly when the goats nudged her for food. Daniel smiled too. He hadn't heard laughter on the ranch in a long time. He watched as she carefully poured grain into the bins and offered hay to the horses. The animals seemed to sense her kindness, and they approached her without fear. "You're good with them," Daniel said. Emily brushed snow off her gloves. "They just want kindness. Most living things do." Her words were simple, but they stayed with Daniel for a long time. After the chores were done, they walked back to the house together. Emily's cheeks were red from the cold, but her eyes were bright. She looked healthier, more alive than the day before. Inside, Daniel warmed water for tea, and they sat near the fire again. "It feels peaceful here," Emily said quietly. "I haven't felt peaceful in a long time." Daniel sipped his tea. "The ranch can be lonely, but it can also be comforting. It gives you space to breathe." Emily nodded, staring into the fire. "I think I needed that." For a long moment, they didn't speak. The only sound was the fire crackling gently. Eventually, Emily looked up. "Do you ever feel lonely?" she asked. Daniel took a slow breath. "Sometimes. Especially after my wife passed. I kept myself busy with work, but the nights were hard. The house felt too big for one person." Emily listened carefully. "I'm sorry you went through that," he nodded. "You know, you being here doesn't make the house feel so empty." Emily's eyes softened, touched by the sincerity in his voice. "I'm glad," she said quietly. "I didn't want to bring trouble." "You haven't," Daniel said firmly. "Not at all." As the day went on, they shared small moments that felt strangely natural. Emily swept the floor, helped Daniel wash a few dishes, and even brushed the snow off the porch. Each time she finished something, she looked up with a tiny, proud smile, as if she wasn't used to being useful or appreciated. And Daniel appreciated her more than she realized. Not because he needed help, he had lived alone long enough to handle everything himself, but because her presence brought a warmth he had forgotten. In the afternoon, the sun came out fully, making the snow shine like a blanket of diamonds. Daniel suggested they take a short walk around the ranch. Emily agreed happily. It seemed she wanted to see the place that had sheltered her. They walked side by side, their boots crunching softly through the snow. The air was crisp, but the sunlight made it feel gentle. Emily looked around, admiring the open fields, the wooden fences, and the distant hills. "It's beautiful," she said. "It feels like a place where someone could start again." Daniel heard the hope in her voice and felt something warm inside him. "It's a good place," he said. "It's been my whole life." Emily looked at him. "Do you ever wish you had left? Seen other places?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Maybe when I was younger. But after I married my wife, the ranch became home. Everything I needed was here." Emily looked down at the snow. "I've tried so many places, but none felt like home. I kept moving because I thought somewhere out there I'd find peace." "Maybe peace isn't in a place," Daniel said. "Maybe it's in the people we meet." Emily smiled softly. "Maybe." When they returned to the house, Daniel cooked a small but warm dinner, vegetables and potatoes. Emily insisted on helping. They worked side by side in the kitchen, passing ingredients, stirring pots, setting the table. It felt almost like a tradition, something shared, something ordinary, yet comforting. When they sat down to eat, Emily took a moment to breathe in the warm steam rising from her plate. "This feels like the first real dinner I've had in months," she admitted quietly. "I'm glad you're here to share it," Daniel said. As they ate, they talked more freely. Emily shared stories from her childhood, simple memories like riding bikes with neighbors or sitting under a big tree near her school. Daniel shared memories of his wife, how she used to make the best pies in the county, how she sang while working in the garden, how she always found joy in small moments. Emily listened closely, as if every detail mattered. Daniel spoke with warmth, not pain. Talking about his wife didn't hurt as much today. Instead of sadness, he felt gratitude. Perhaps Emily's gentle presence had softened something inside him. After dinner, they returned to the fireplace. Emily stretched her hands toward the warmth. Today felt peaceful, she said. Like I wasn't running. Like I could just be. Daniel looked at her. You deserve days like this. Emily's eyes glistened with emotion she tried to hide. Thank you. You've shown me more kindness in 2 days than most people have shown me in years. Daniel didn't know what to say for a moment. Kindness had always been simple to him, something natural, something expected. But hearing her say that made him realize just how hard her journey had been. You're safe here, he said softly. You don't need to earn your place. You don't need to worry. Emily took a slow breath, letting the warmth of his words sink in. I believe you, she whispered. The fire glowed softly. The room felt warm, calm, and full of quiet understanding. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt less alone. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt protected, accepted, and seen. The storm had brought her to his door, but kindness was what kept her there. And though neither knew what the future would bring, they both felt something new growing between them. Trust, comfort, and a gentle sense of hope. And on that peaceful night, two hearts that had once carried heavy burdens found a small light in each other's company. When morning arrived, the sky was clear for the first time in days. A soft golden light rested over the snowy ranch, making everything look calm and gentle. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind long stretches of untouched snow that sparkled like tiny stars. It was quiet, but not the sad kind of quiet, more like the peaceful silence after a cold night finally gives way to warmth. Daniel woke early, as he always did. He walked to the kitchen, made coffee, and then looked toward the living room. Emily was still sleeping on the couch, wrapped in the blanket. Her face relaxed in a way he hadn't seen before. She looked like someone who finally had a safe night of rest after a long journey. Daniel didn't wake her right away. He wanted her to enjoy a few more moments of peace. Instead, he stepped outside to check the barn again. The animals were calm, the fences held, and the sunlight made the ranch feel alive again. But something inside him felt different today. Something he couldn't quite explain. It was as if the ranch didn't feel as empty as it had for years. When he returned to the house, Emily was awake and sitting on the edge of the couch, stretching her arms. She looked around quietly, then smiled when she saw him. Good morning, she said softly. Good morning, Daniel replied. Did you sleep well? Emily nodded. Better than I have in a long time. Daniel placed a plate of warm pancakes on the table. He had made them the way his wife used to, soft and simple, with a bit of honey on top. Emily sat down and took a small bite. Her eyes brightened. These are really good, she said. I'm glad you like them, Daniel replied with a small smile. They ate quietly, the peaceful morning wrapping around them like a gentle blanket. But Daniel could sense that Emily was thinking deeply. She took slow breaths and stared at the snow outside as if something heavy was on her mind. After breakfast, she placed her fork down carefully. Daniel, she began in a soft voice, the storm is over. I should probably leave today. Her words reached Daniel like a sudden cold wind. He had known this moment would come, but hearing it still made his heart sink. He didn't want to show his sadness, so he nodded slowly. If that's what you feel you should do. Emily looked down at her hands. I don't really know where to go, she admitted. But I don't want to stay here if it's trouble for you. Daniel leaned forward slightly. You are not trouble, Emily. Not even for a moment. She lifted her eyes, confusion and relief mixing in her expression. You've already done so much for me. You gave me a warm place, food, safety. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. Daniel took a breath. He wanted to choose his words carefully. Kindness isn't something that disappears when shared, he said. Helping you isn't a burden. And I don't want you walking into the cold again without a plan. Emily looked toward the door. as if imagining the long, snowy road waiting outside. "I don't want to go back to my old life," she whispered. "But I don't know what my new life is supposed to be." Daniel's eyes softened. "Then maybe this place can be a small beginning," he said. "Not forever, not with pressure. Just until you find your next step." Emily stared at him, surprised. "Are you asking me to stay?" "Yes," Daniel said gently. "Stay here until you're ready to move forward. Stay where you're safe." Emily's lips trembled slightly, her emotions rising to the surface. "But why?" she asked. "Why would you offer me that?" Daniel thought for a moment. He wasn't a man who used fancy words, so he spoke simply. "Because you came here on a night when both of us were lonely. Because you brought warmth back to this house without even realizing it. And because I don't want you to face the world alone when you're not ready." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, trying to steady her breath. Tears glimmered in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of relief. Something she wasn't used to feeling. "You really don't want anything in return?" she asked softly. "No," Daniel said. "Just take care of yourself. And if you want to help around the ranch, you can. But only if you want to." Emily wiped her eyes. "I do want to help. It makes me feel useful. It makes me feel like I belong somewhere." Daniel felt a warmth rise in his chest. "Then stay," he said softly. "Stay as long as you need." Emily nodded slowly, still trying to control her emotions. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Her voice was small, full of gratitude, and a little bit of hope. It was the first time in a long time she felt she wasn't alone. The rest of the morning was calm. Emily helped Daniel shovel the last bits of snow near the porch. She laughed when she slipped a little, and Daniel steadied her with a gentle hand. The quiet moments between them felt natural, as if they had known each other longer than they actually had. Later, they sat down for tea. Emily looked around the living room, taking in the quiet warmth of the ranch house. "It feels like home," she said without meaning to. Daniel noticed the blush on her cheeks as soon as she realized what she had said. Instead of teasing her, he smiled softly. "I'm glad it feels that way." The afternoon continued peacefully. Emily helped brush the horses, and Daniel repaired a broken shelf while she handed him tools. She enjoyed every moment because, for the first time in a long time, she felt safe, respected, and valued. In the evening, they prepared dinner together. Emily chopped vegetables carefully, and Daniel seasoned the soup. They talked, laughed softly, and shared stories from their pasts. Neither of them forced the conversation. It flowed naturally, gently, like a stream finding its way across stones. After dinner, they sat in front of the fireplace again. The flames danced softly, filling the room with a golden glow. Emily leaned back in her chair and watched the fire. "It's strange," she said. "Yesterday I was scared, hungry, freezing. And today I feel calm, like I'm finally standing on steady ground." "That's what safety feels like," Daniel said quietly. "Everyone deserves it." "Christ, I'm self-table, so elated." Emily turned to him. "Thank you for giving me a place to breathe." "You're welcome," Daniel replied. "And thank you for reminding me what it feels like to have company. I had forgotten that." Emily smiled gently. "I'm glad I knocked on your door." Daniel nodded. "And I'm glad I opened it." The room fell into a warm silence. They didn't need to say anything more. The fire spoke for them, the crackling flames, the warmth spreading through the house, the soft peace that filled the air. Outside, the world was still covered in snow. But inside, something new had begun. Something small, but powerful. Something shaped by kindness, trust, and unexpected connection. Emily didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. She knew she had a place to rest, to heal, and to find her strength again. Daniel didn't know what the coming days would bring either, but he knew his home didn't feel empty anymore. Two people, brought together by a storm on a cold Christmas Eve, found hope where neither expected it, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through simple kindness, gentle understanding, and the quiet warmth of shared days. And though their journey together was just beginning, both Emily and Daniel knew one thing for certain. Sometimes life gives you unexpected chances, and sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything. Other part